Welcome, I'm Christine Manning with the Wine Education Institute. Thank you for joining me on today's tour of Burgundy. Burgundy's wine renown stretches back to the 1st century BCE, when Romans cleared land and planted their varietals. As time progressed, Romans re-engineered the Seine to allow for navigation and trade from the coast through Paris to Burgundy, allowing for these wines to reach further throughout their empire and beyond. Fast forward to the 6th century, Christian monks began refining and documenting varietals and vintages, leading to the appellation nuances still appreciated today. The large number of producers and appellations in Burgundy can create complexity, but the region is fundamentally the ancient home of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which are the foundations and models for wines now produced from these varieties worldwide. Let's dive in. Burgundy's climate ranges from cool continental, particularly in the northern Chablis region, to more moderate continental conditions further south. Rain in the spring and fall can impact flowering and harvest quality. It can be cool enough to have damaging frosts, and summertimes can bring destructive hailstorms. Precise, actual location is key to understanding the hierarchies within Burgundy. The best sites are mid-slope, where air moves downward, minimizing frost and wet mist. On the valley floor, where the cool air can concentrate, that tends to be home to more of the village level tiers. The top of the hill means more exposure to the cool prevailing westerly winds, as well as not being able to take advantage of south or east facing aspects. Since Burgundy is at 47 degrees latitude, we need to catch that late autumn sunlight as best as we can. Midslope also allows for better exposure of limestone and marl soils and has better drainage and less clay than lower down the slope. Pinot Noir is a dominant black grape variety and makes up for 1/3 of the plantings in Burgundy. This grape buds early, making it highly susceptible to spring frost and gray rot. We see our expected red fruit flavors with high acid that allows for aging, tertiary flavors that may develop into mushroom and earth, despite our tannins being low to moderate. Whole bunch fermentation can be used, especially in light of our tannin levels. Oak use, when compared to other wine regions, may look more careful or restrained, such as 1.5 years in oak, with new oak being reserved only for those high quality wines. Chardonnay is a dominant white variety, capable of producing high-acid, lean wines in the north, all the way to full-bodied, rich wines further south. Burgundy includes Chablis, which is not contiguous and is a ways north at 48 degrees latitude. Here, Chardonnay can show that steely, linear precision of a cool climate Chardonnay, and it will rarely be oaked. If you do find an oak Chablis, it usually is in a neutral oak. On the other end of the spectrum, you can see fleshy, partial to full malolactic styles with full body and fruity expressions from the south. These can support new French oak, both in fermentation and maturation. In between these two styles, for example, in the Côte d'Or, we have a blend, which is considered the finest expression of Chardonnay. Burgundian winemakers were the pioneers of barrel fermentation for Chardonnay, the use of lees, tempered malolactic conversion, and precisely toasting oak for that Chardonnay maturation. Beyond the two main grapes, the region utilizes other varieties. The white variety Aligoté produces wine with high acidity and respectable quality, but it is not allowed in the high-level appellations in Burgundy that we'll discuss in a minute. The red variety Gamay yields light-body, fruity wines, though its use is restricted to wines classified at the village and regional level. Gamay can be ranked at all levels in Beaujolais, Burgundy's neighbor to the south. Let's review the Appellation Hierarchy in Burgundy, which is based primarily on quality and location. It's helpful to think of French appellation system as a pyramid with the broadest base in terms of size and regulations at the bottom, and the narrowest coming from more specific locations and with more production regulations at the top. In Burgundy, our hierarchy consists of 4 main tiers. The first are regional appellations. These will form the broadest base of the pyramid, and in Burgundy account for approximately half of the region's total production. Bourgogne Rouge, red, and Bourgogne Blanc, white, are generic regional appellations that can source grapes from anywhere within Burgundy. There are regional appellations within Burgundy with slightly stricter geographical boundaries, such as Bourgogne Haute-Côte Nuit, Bourgogne Haute-Côte de Beaune. Remember, haute means higher or upper, and Côte Châlonnaise. We also have the Mâconnais, or Mâcon for red, and Mâcon Village for white. These vineyards are located higher or lower on our famous slopes, resulting in typically less concentrated wines. Bourgogne Côte d'Or is a recently introduced regional appellation for wines produced from the villages within the Côte d'Or. Next up are village appellations, or our communes. Chambolle-Musigny, or Gevrey-Chambertin, are examples of our village appellations, and these can account for 1/3 of our total production. Wines must come entirely from our named village commune. Exceptions include Côte Nuit Village and Côte de Beaune Village, which are regional appellations for wines sourced from a combination of villages that do not qualify for our more prestigious appellations. Next up are Premier Cru. Premier Cru vineyards represent sites recognized as superior to our village level plots. There are over 600 classified vineyards, contributing to approximately 10% of Burgundy's productions. Wines from this level must carry the village name followed by the vineyard name on the label. Interestingly, the vineyards were famous before the villages, so the inhabitants lobbied for their names to be attached to these labels for increased notoriety. And last but certainly not least are our Grand Crus. Grand Crus represent the highest quality classification. These wines are exceptionally rare and make up less than 1.4% of production in the Côte d'Or and Chablis. The label will only display the name of the vineyard, omitting the village name, except in Chablis, where 7 of the neighboring sites are collectively classified as Grand Cru. Now that we understand how these sites are ranked, let's look more closely at some of the key subregions and appellations in Burgundy. Starting in the north with Chablis, it is separated about 10 miles from the heart of Burgundy. And Chablis itself is a step above regional and is a village appellation. About a century ago, Petit Chablis was introduced to incorporate adjacent, generally more marginal vineyards that, with improved vineyard management, were able to yield more viable wines. Looking at Chablis, Chardonnay is the exclusive grape, and as you can imagine, south-facing slopes are where our Premier and Grand Crus are situated to capture sun and mitigate against frost, which is a very common danger this far up north. Sprinklers and heaters are commonly deployed to help mitigate frost. Sprinklers for irrigation are not allowed, but by sprinkling the vine in the cooler months, they actually form a protective layer of ice over those tender buds. The flatter land or north-facing slopes are where we tend to find our straight village Chablis vineyards. High acidity is the norm, but those south-facing slopes can allow Chardonnay to develop some additional texture, body, and riper flavors. In good years, these wines can handle some fermentation and maturation in oak, but safe to assume this would be in used or neutral oak. The heartland of Burgundy is the Côte d'Or, split into 2 distinct subregions, the Côte de Nuit to the north and the Côte de Beaune to the south. I like to remember N for north and Nuit. Côte de Nuit is famous for its powerful, full-bodied red wines made from Pinot Noir. Key village appellations include Gevrey-Chambertin with Chambertin Grand Cru, Vougeot, and Vaux-Romanée, home of the famous Romanée-Conti, La Romanée, and La Tâche, and the village of Nuit-Saint-Georges. All but one Côte de Nuit Grand Cru are for red wines. And don't worry, you don't need to pronounce any of them. Just south to the Côte de Beaune, we also have the famous wines from villages such as Alex-Croton, Beaune, Pommard, Volnay, Meursault, Prony-Montrachet, and Chassagne-Montrachet, which shares the Grand Cru Montrachet. Most of these make both red and white wines. 2 exceptions are Pommard and Volnay, which only produce red wine. Inversely, all Côte de Beaune Grand Crus except one come from Chardonnay. We also have a Côte Nuit village for red and white across the Côte Nuit, a Côte du Bon village for red only, and a Côte d'Or village for red and white, cross both Nuit and Bon. Higher in elevation, we have our regional Bourgogne Haute Côte Nuit, a Bourgogne Haute Côte du Bon. Higher elevation wines means more exposure to wind, tending to produce lighter and leaner styles. Located to the south of the Côte d'Or is Côte Châlonnaise, and this region provides good value wines where vineyards are situated on hillsides with fewer east-facing slopes and tend to ripen a little later due to more elevation than Côte d'Or. There are no Grand Cru vineyards here, but the following villages do have Premier Cru villages, such as Rouy, primarily white wines and sparkling, Mercury, important for red wines, and Givry, a small appellation known for admired reds, and Montagny, which can produce white wines only. Lastly, the Mâconnais in the south of Burgundy. Chardonnay is the most widely planted grape here. And actually, Gamay will surpass Pinot Noir in the Mâconnais since it borders Beaujolais. Wouldn't be surprising. As I mentioned, local regional appellations Mâcon, which produces red and white wines, and wines labeled Mâcon Village or Mâcon - fill in a specific village, wines can display good ripeness and character. The most esteemed village appellations in the Mâconnais are Puy-Puissé, with some Premier Cru vineyards, and Saint-Véran, both known for rich, ripe, tropical fruit white wines, often oaked and planted on east-facing limestone slopes. We also start to see some Gamay planted here. After today's lecture, you should have a better understanding of the Burgundy appellation system that acts like a pyramid of precision, with the wide base of regional Bourgogne, Bourgogne Rouge, and Blanc that offers a general geographical identity. And each step up the pyramid from Mâcon Village to Gevrey-Chambertin through to Premier Cru and Grand Cru progressively tightens the focus and defining quality and precision down to a specific parcel. You can even see this progression physically when you look closely at the topographical map of Burgundy. As the land progresses from valleys to slopes, so too do the ranking of the vineyards. At this level, you should be able to apply your knowledge of Burgundy's climate and general topography to explain the why behind these regional classification systems. Of course, know the key varietals grown here, have a firm grasp on the regional labeling and production practices as well. Thank you for joining me. Cheers!